All right, so like, let's just start off with the fact that you are in Spain, and let's just start there. Like, introduce yourself for
Sure.
those that somehow don't know who you are, and if they don't, they'll want to know now.
So I'm William Wayland. I'm a strength and conditioning coach based in the UK, and I own a gym called Powering Through Performance. And the reason I'm in Spain is because I work as a consultant for the DP World Tour and Challenge Tour at the European Tour Performance Institute, and I'm here in Spain for the Challenge Tour Grand Final. So a much smaller field than I'm used to, and we're here in Alcanada, where it's being hosted this year, and yeah, I'm at the end of day one, so I've been on the ground today working with the players, and I'll be working with them again tomorrow before I fly back home. So that's kind of my situation at the moment.
So there's a lot to unpack, in my opinion. There, let's start with, you said it's a smaller field than I'm used to. What does that mean?
So typically we'll have over 100 players per event. This event we've got 43, and there's no cut. So none of the players will be done on Friday. They'll all play from Thursday through to Sunday. So typically I'm at the beck and call of potentially 100 or more players. This time only 40 or so. So yeah, it's a good event for me because it means it's kind of quieter, but I can then really target people, particularly the ones that have been confirmed to go up from Challenge Tour to DP World Tour next year. Well, those have already earned their status, because we want to keep them in our system. We want to keep them working with the European Tour Performance Institute. We let them know what things are available as they go up to the DP World Tour, where there are more resources and a lot more opportunity to be coached and trained.
All right, so we'll go next. Is it says you said day one followed by fly home.
Mm-hmm.
What is day one? What does day two look like? Just talk about that.
So typically when I come out to these events, I'm here for 2 days. Most golf tournaments will begin on a Thursday, and practice days typically sort of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Sometimes on Wednesday there'll be a pro-am event. I'll typically work with the players on Tuesday, Wednesday. Some players don't even get to the event until Tuesday. So what happens is, because I'm available first come first serve basis, the players book in to see me, and basically I've got roughly 9 to 10 hour slots throughout the day, and if you miss a chance to book me, that's it, you've missed it. But the link goes out to the players, and obviously, yeah, there's only one of me. So, but sometimes I'll catch up with guys. We'll have short consults and stuff, or if there's someone who is in need of something specific, like they've just come off the treatment table and they need some sort of specific intervention, I can usually find time somewhere. While I am scheduled for like an hour per athlete, we can sometimes cut it down to half hour, or it depends what they want, and that's what I'm there for. Basically, it's based on what the players want and what they want out of a strength and conditioning coach. Sometimes it's a case of educating them as to exactly what it is that I do. Because golf is S&C is still rather novel.
How did you get into this? This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I
Accidentally.
mean, you do look like a golf player. So is that a golf player? Did I just like
You're
butcher that?
profiling right now,
Golfer.
Fernando? What is that supposed to mean? He could just bomb the ball. Come on.
Exactly. You know exactly what
I'm
I mean.
joking.
When he said, this is a smaller field than I'm used to," I thought he meant about the people. Like, everyone's so small here.
So what was your question again? Sorry, I was distracted.
How'd you get into this? Like, how?
Oh yeah,
because he's right. Like, you're a massive human being. Like,
but before we go into that, actually, there has been a shift from like bigger golfers like striking longer balls, right? Like, you probably have an insight of that.
Yeah.
Happy Gilmore style.
Yeah, that's a bigger general trend, is that they're all hitting it further now. They've all got higher club head speeds. More of them are athletic, and we've had guys who've come through working with me on Challenge Tour. They've gone on to the DP World Tour, and those same guys have then gone on to win events. And they look like athletes. They look like they're different to the golfers that came before them. So yeah, the nature of the game is changing. It's becoming a more athletic endeavor. Absolutely. But how I got into this, most people originally knew me for working in MMA and jiu-jitsu. I mean, I've got my Gracie Barra t-shirt on. And that's kind of my background personally, is jiu-jitsu. I've been doing jiu-jitsu 12 years, and I was working with one or two MMA fighters, and a jiu-jitsu fighter who quite often, obviously, those athletes are going to see physios for all sorts of issues. One particular physio, said, look, I'm going to start sending some golfers your way. Let's see how that goes. And so I started working with them, started doing my interventions. The golfers did well. That then led to a case of this same physio also working at England Golf, also working on the European Tour. And slowly but surely, as I gained his trust, it was like, look, there's more opportunity for you here because you're doing a good job with these guys. Do you want to try and come out on a challenge tour event and see how you get on? Traveling for a job like that is something I'd never really done before. And I went out and ever since then, for the past 5-6 years, I've been doing a good job and getting asked to do more and more and more. And it's just so kind of gone that way. So it's a case of having someone in your network and then proving your value to them, that you gain their trust and then get the work that way, it's just, sort of grown out of that, really, out of building trust and doing a good job. Because obviously, if I was some sort of flub and didn't do a good job, or just took the opportunity just to use it as a trip away, that's not going to work. So they want results. So they are interested in metrics and outcomes. So it's a case of just proving you can do the job well, gaining trust, and just keep on going down that route, really, I hope.
What are the results that they're looking for? Like, what are your KPIs, or how are you being judged?
Yeah, so we have a testing battery that we have with these guys, and because the biggest proof of the pudding that we have for golfers right now in terms of impact is club head speed. So we always want to try and, if we can, try and improve their club head speed, and then we take club head speed, ball speed, but then we take that against typical S&C performance measures. So we look at IMTP, counter movement jump, that type of stuff, and then we see those 4 values are kind of our key KPIs for these athletes: club head speed, ball speed, isometric mid-thigh pull, counter movement jump, impulse. Those are the kind of main things we care about, because we know that high mid-thigh pulls, high counter movement jump impulses correlate very strongly to high club head speed. So generally, those guys who are pulling high numbers, hitting their jumps well, usually hit the ball further. Usually, not always, but usually.
No, I mean, that's unbelievable. And you started talking about, our system in the UK. What did you mean by that?
I'm not sure you mean the system we use on tour, or
like what exactly did you mean by that? Like, elaborate for me, just to educate me on that.
I can't remember exactly what it is. What context? So I said the system we use on.
Yeah, like the system that we use in terms of like funneling players once they become confirmed, and just all of that.
Okay. Yeah. So, basically, what happens is, I also took a job very recently with England Golf. So that's kind of the grassroots level. The guys come through as juniors, amateurs, and then once they go from amateurs, they start playing pro. And the way our system works is quite often these guys will come up on the challenge tour. Challenge tour, where I am a lot of the time, is a developmental tour.
Okay.
And the guys quite often that win challenge tour go on to then perform very well on DP World Tour. So I'll work between both tours, and I'll try and make sure that the translation from challenge tour to DP World Tour is a happy one. If that makes sense.
No, that sounds, that does. That sounds tough.
And then the challenge tour is fed by lots of satellite tours around Europe. So, and then there is some confluence between like PGA, other tours around the world, because, for instance, I think the PGA Tour has a 20% stake in the European Tour and DP World Tour. So there is some crossover, and we do get guys from the States come play, we get guys from Australia come play, and then there's some crossover coming back the other way as well. So we do get like a big load, mainly European athletes, but we do get guys come international. Like we have Australia, like this week we've got a guy from South Africa, who's one of the guys who's leading. We've got a guy from Australia, a guy from New Zealand. So we've got lots of different players from all over at these events as well.
So go ahead, Fernando.
I was gonna say, like, being recently involved in a sport that hasn't traditionally welcomed S&C. That's my case. I imagine in golf, people like, do you see any reluctancy, or people saying like, oh, golf is not about this, golf is not about that? Not that in this case that you're forcing anyone, so you're not part of a team, so people are obliged to do S&C, but Have you seen or do you perceive any of that?
Yeah, of course. It's not unusual. For instance, when S&C started to become quite popular, particularly in the world of sort of sports punditry, Nick Faldo, other people, Brandel Chambly, a few other guys who are quite well known, like outspoken critics of strength training for golf, because they see it ruining the sport. It only becoming a game where it can be won by the guys who are the biggest and the strongest and can hit it the furthest. And it's like, well, no sport is purely won on technicality alone, because there's people always going to be looking for some type of advantage. And if you don't keep up, you're going to fall behind. So if guys, you think a rare case where a sport from a technical standpoint has been turned inside out, like golf, you want to dig into the golf swing, you can go down so many black holes because it's such a heavily analyzed movement, probably more than any other sport. There are, and there are coaches who dig into this stuff and go so deep. And then there's this sort of component sat at the side that they're totally missing out on, which is physicality and how that leads into the golf swing. Because to them, it's like just a purely technical, beautiful movement that should be studied and analyzed and picked apart. And it's all about the technicality of the swing. Only now they're starting to realize that, wait a minute, technicality is important. If we actually want to put some force behind the swing, stuff like ground reaction force, things like that are super important. So, and there are still guys now, and I think I made a tweet today on this very point, that a lot of very talented golfers, because they're very talented, can get quite far without needing S&C until their first injury. Because the most common injury we see in golf, almost 80%, is overuse. And you get someone who's practicing their technical aspects all the time, constantly, they're going to end up with some sort of overuse injury. And that's suddenly when they think, oh crap, robustness is perhaps something I need to consider as part of my approach. And what was happening, we were finding, is a lot of them were coming to S&C later in their careers because they'd achieved this high technical output. And then suddenly when the wheels started to fall off, then they come back to S&C. Well, the case is, well, what if we can get them doing S&C sooner and have them come up as a holistic part of their process, rather than just being totally technically focused and then needing it later on. So there are still coaches now that aren't on board, but they're generally pretty old school. Any coach that's sort of, a lot of the guys I talk to now are very on board with it. The attitude has changed a lot in the last 5 years, because there's been lots of good published research as well. Friends of mine, other coaches that I know, have done an awful lot to put out research to back up what we're saying about physicality in golf and how the two things are kind of important.
Yeah, and I think it's the quality and the quantity. It's not like you are, for example, getting golfers doing running drills and sprinting because the central nervous system will get them to. Justin is cracking. Can't see on camera. He's just cracking. But you know what I mean? Like, I think for every side of the argument, there's always someone helping us and always someone doing worse. So if you think about in very simple terms, if you were to hit with X amount of force and you're suddenly stronger every time you project that force, it's cost effective and whatever. So there's definitely rooms for improvement everywhere. It's just having an open mind. And Justin, maybe just we'll see some golfers sprinting with bands anytime soon.
Well, I have run into people that have said that sprinting should be good for golfers and for fighters, and I'm not particularly on board with that, seeing as I work in both sports. And I'm like,
if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Sometimes.
Exactly. The sprint experts can sling their hook.
So you talking about the technicality breaking down swings makes me think about what I've heard is, a baseball coach would mess up Babe Ruth, or a sprint coach would ruin Usain Bolt. Have you seen that happen with golf?
So
without saying names, sorry, I want a disclaimer,
no, golfers are strange creatures in the quite often they make changes, and if they do make changes, they make them all at once. So they'll do a ton of things all at once, and they have a really hard time quite often attributing to what's actually making any real difference, which is very frustrating.
Sounds like an easy way to figure it out.
Because as soon as something goes wrong, or if something's like not working for them, they'll change their swing coach, they'll change their short game coach, they'll change their long game coach. you know, and they'll perhaps change their physio, they'll change, you know, a whole bunch of stuff. They'll maybe
Their
change their
wives, their
management,
kids, they
you know.
move around.
Yeah, and it's just moving deck chairs on the Titanic a lot of the time, and yeah, it's interesting sometimes when that happens, and you know, I've had instances where players, for instance, one guy who worked with me for a long time, has won events on European tour. I had a great relationship with him. He suffered an injury issue, unrelated to golf, I believe. Was having a really rough time of it, but decided to change his coach, decided to stop working with me, decided to change everything. And yeah, then obviously it's not really working for him. So it's and that's kind of confused me. It says, why would you take away the things that have gotten you where you are and then suddenly get rid of them all? And there's this you know, this issue in golf of always trying to chase perfection, and that problem leads to them sort of being neurotic and like, yeah, wanting to change stuff sort of fairly regularly. Sort of, you quite often have guys change their coaches quite a lot. You look at the, you know, the Rory McIlroys and the Tiger Woods of this game. Like even some of the top guys change their coaching staff quite regularly. So it's interesting. There's a lot of turnover, and because obviously operates different to other sports in that you're paying your coaches to do this stuff for you. So because you are a customer, you feel that you can perhaps chop and change. It's not like working for a sports team where obviously your head coach is your head coach. There's nothing you can do about it. You know, you either get on with them or you don't. Whereas in golf, because you're paying for private services, unless you're working with us, it's free. The tour puts on the service. But if you're working with your coaches and you're paying them for their time. So, you know, some of them will take a percentage, some of them will want a front up fee. And then if the player is dissatisfied, they'll go elsewhere because they feel like a customer, as opposed to, you know, having that sort of normal coach athlete relationship, I guess.
I was going to build on that and ask you on the psychological aspect of individual sports, because you've trained fighters as well. But you did develop the business side, which makes sense. I mean, you think even if your perception of the service you're getting is not great, you might change it. But how much do you reckon that individual sport feature influences all that, like the control factor, like the, you know, blaming on the exterior maybe sometimes?
Yeah,
With
yeah,
difference to
it is.
fighters, you
And
know?
yeah, something I do encourage guys in individual sports to do is because they tend to take on an awful lot on themselves, is perhaps, you know, and those types of athletes quite often will have interesting personalities anyway, because they've gravitated towards individual sports. They bear the cross of everything's on them to perform well. And sometimes they have a hard time looking inwardly and saying, where perhaps am I falling short? Instead, when things go bad, quite often it's a lashing out. It's looking at the external factors around them. What can I change? What can I move? You know, and you know, again, it's perhaps the type of athlete, particularly in golf, is that quite often they'll get so bogged down in minutia that they'll look for different gadgets to use, supplements, different swing tools, whereas perhaps just getting stronger, sleeping well, being healthier might make all the difference. But again, it's you know, rather than perhaps self-examination saying, hey, what could I be doing better? Instead, they look externally and it's like, what things around them can they change maybe, you know?
It's desperation, isn't it? Like for a bit.
Now, what do you think in terms of how that relates to the, you know, that psychological aspect of the four coactives? You know, we had Fergus on before. What is the best way to go about handling that arousal, especially in a sport like mixed martial arts and golf that you've worked with?
Yeah, so I guess the two, you know, somewhat golf is a weird sport. Unlike a fight where you've got, you know, 3 5-minute rounds or 5-minute rounds or whatever, the pressure is there and then to perform well, and you know, there are OODA loops to close and lots of things like that going on. In golf, it's different because it's a closed skill. You're stood over a shot, for instance, and I've had players in this situation where you make or don't make this shot. It's the difference between, you know, £100,000 or $100,000, you know, and that's like perhaps your last shot of the day. You've got to handle that situation And I guess it's that arousal factor. A lot of it is, you talk to the players, and a lot of it's largely idiosyncratic, because some enjoy the challenge of being in a situation like that. Others have to tell themselves that it's just another shot, and that weight of future, the weight of the potential of the future, the difference that might make, is something that they don't bring to mind. So again, with this, because you can hand out sort of trite psychological truisms, but again, I always think it's rather idiosyncratic, and the individual's response to stress, anxiety, and how they handle sort of states of arousal, it's kind of down on them, and their coach to figure that stuff out. I know that's not a particularly good answer, but I always find that psychology is sort of very nebulous, and it's again, it's something that's highly idiosyncratic.
You mentioned something that, me being outside of the golf game, and I'm assuming our listeners also didn't understand, was short game coaches, long game coaches. Is the putting coach part of the short game? Like that's really interesting to me. Like, elaborate on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, you can have I've seen coaches for both short game. I've seen putting coaches. I've seen swing coaches, which I guess would be closer to a long game coach. So, and then you've got biomechanists as well, who quite often are a tertiary character that'll feed into all of those things. So if you're a golfer, you can really get bogged down in seeing lots of different people. And quite often I've seen situations where it's too many cooks spoil the broth, where guys have got 4 different people talking in their ear. A golfer, like for instance, I met with a fella today he changed his coach 2 years ago, but he's got one coach, and that coach handles everything. I think he's happier for that than his previous situation, where I think he had 2 or 3 coaches. I think he had a putting coach, a biomechanist, and another coach as well that was like sort of a general coach. So, again, it's up to the player, because they're hiring these guys. They are the customer, and it depends what the athlete wants. And quite often what you find is that golfers will shop for solutions. So they will change coaches an awful lot. MMA fighters don't do that. Generally, they'll stay at the same gym until they die. So maybe change gyms once in their lives. But with golfers, again, it's shopping around for solutions.
What, for those again that don't understand it, what is the difference between the PGA and this other? Is it LV?
Yep. Yeah, so live golf.
Oh, okay, live. There you go.
So we've got three main players in golf at the moment. So you've got the PGA Tour, based in the US, and most of their events are all in the US. And then you've got the European Tour, or as it's known now, because it's changed its name due to its kind of sponsorship arrangement, was the European Tour. It's now the DP World Tour, which is probably the second biggest golf outfit in the world. Some of the players do chop and change between them. So some will come out and play Rolex events and then head back to the US. Some go the other way. They go from Europe to the US. And quite often what we see is a talent drain from Europe to the US, because the prize purses are that much bigger in the US. Don't get me wrong, you can still win a few million quid playing the DP World Tour, but the prize money is like 3 or 4 times that on the PGA Tour. Now you've got a third player that's just come into the game, Live Golf, who are funded by the Saudi investment fund. And basically they have unlimited money, something the PGA and the DP World Tour do not have. With Live Golf, we've had players from DP World and from Challenge Tour take part in those events. I can't really comment on the situation with the players and their status and stuff when they do come back and forth. But I can say that obviously with Live Golf, the one thing they do have is big prize purses, and they can offer a lot of money to guys who come further down the field, which is a big draw. Because if you play like a Challenge Tour event, and if you're not inside the top 10, you're not getting much money. Whereas there are guys who are just reserves for Live Golf, making $60,000 just for turning up and doing nothing. So that's why Live Golf has such a massive draw, because money talks. And a lot of guys, particularly guys on the PGA Tour who are in kind of the twilight of their careers, they're perhaps not making as much money on the PGA Tour anymore. They get offered millions to go and play and Live Golf. they're going to take it. So, you know,
Yeah, that doesn't sound like
this.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. You go.
No, and said, and the thing is that it's again that situation of just money talks, right? And you know, given the media's obsession with it, you know, there's questionability around the Saudi investment fund and their connection to that country. So, you know, but it's interesting seeing the to and fro, and people are really worried that the live golf was going to have a big impact, but I don't think its impact has been perhaps quite as large as they did, because basically this new competitor had come along with you know, unlimited funds, and whoop, sorry, you might have to cut this out. My phone just fell down. Yeah, see, this is what happens when I don't travel with a tripod.
No, this makes it authentic. This is what we're looking for.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, and they've come along with their unlimited funds, and they can offer players that they want anything. There has been a few situations where players because they run smaller fields at live. I think it's either 54 or 64, I can't remember. And there's no cut either, so players get to play the whole week. But basically, guys who were took on early on live, some of the guys who are like the bottom end of the table have now been given the heave ho, because it's like, well, we've now got more talented players, so you guys are getting shunted out, and they've come back to some of the other events, not with their tails between their legs, but definitely sort of they've gone on, made a bit of money, and then come back to there again. So, but you were going to say something before I interrupted.
No, I was going to say, just from an outsider, it sounds like most people are really mad about this live golf thing, and it doesn't sound, based off what you're saying, like anything that should be that big of a upheaval. So
yeah, what's basically the worry is golf trades on its names, right? So there are a lot of their big name athletes, the stars, so to speak, that people want to see play. When you get your TV coverage, because this is the other thing, TV coverage in golf is where a lot of the money comes from.
There it is.
And you've got I can't remember who PGA's deal is with. I'm not sure if it's ESPN or whoever. You know, they want to hype up golf events based on the talent that's there. Now you've got some of these more senior golfers who are well-known names going over to live, and now the guys are, you know, other companies are getting twitchy because it's like, well, we can't promote the event based on, you know, whoever's going to be there, because they're gone now, you know. And there was a bit of back and forth that, well, if you play live events, you maybe can't play any of the you know, historically prestigious golf events anymore. So there was a lot of back and forth between you know, the companies trying to figure out, you know, what to do in that regard.
That's interesting. And do you know if live and PGA are also doing, you know, this consultancy type thing that you're doing? If you don't, it makes complete sense. So
here's the thing: they don't. There are people there, but they do not have a setup like we do. Yes, PGA pay more. The PGA has trucks that follow the tour around with gym equipment on. They're not staffed, is my understanding. Players can take their own people on board. But what you have with the European Tour Performance Institute is medical, physiotherapy, strength and conditioning, nutrition, psychology, sports med, all in one place, free to the players. And, you know, while those other events might pay more, we like to think that the ETPI look after our players better if they want to come see us. They don't have to. There's no compulsion. It's free to them. But we like to think that we look after people.
That makes sense why when I asked you if you knew my buddy Mark, who's the Cairo, because he's here in the States and he's with the PGA Tour. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for players that go to, you know, all of these different tours, like, what is the travel schedule like, and how do you manage that and work with all of that as you're? I'm glad you're smiling. Go ahead, go on that. Yeah. So so the travel schedule is
until, because I'm only out a couple of times a year, and it's tough on me. Some of these guys are out maybe 30 weeks a year, with maybe the odd couple of weeks off between events. If you're playing the whole, like all the events, then it's taking a lot of your time out of the year. And yeah, literally, you know, and these guys have kind of got systems figured out for dealing with some of these problems. So they'll have groups of friends that they'll hire houses together and stuff, and all sorts of things like that to try and keep costs down, because that's the other thing. Just playing alone and traveling, all that stuff comes at a great cost to the individual. If you're not winning any money, that makes it even harder. So, you know, There are a few guys, I think it was maybe Richie Ramsey, I can't remember who it was, but one of the guys did put up on Twitter that he basically ran a loss last year. You know, and this guy's a multiple time tour winner, just to make the point of how tough it is on tour for some of these guys. So with the travel schedule, pretty much you finish Sunday night, you quite often catch the first plane out on Monday to go to the next event, and then repeat the process multiple times. This is what happens when I'm actually using a tub of magnesium glycinate. Shout out to Pratik Patel for that one as a stand for my phone. So, you know, yeah. You got to travel with your magnesium, mate. Got to get a good night's sleep at these hotel rooms. So yeah, it's a case of learning that they have to be agile and adaptable on the road. This is a big part of our S&C approach. This is where Mladen's approach has been enormously useful for myself, in that because we check, like for instance, I did chuck up some video, some pictures on my Instagram of the gym I'm working out of. Yeah. So I was here 3 years ago. Gym was excellent. They had in this hotel. Hopefully the guys who are in the hotel might be watching this. Who knows? But the 3 years ago, it was great. It had a rack, it had a bar, it had barbells, it had Olympic plates. We could do like proper workouts here. I've come back. I guess during COVID, they got rid of a bunch of stuff to make, because the gym's kind of small, to make more room. All they've got now is like a cable crossover station and dumbbells up to 20. And that's it. That's all I've got this time. So I came out expecting one thing, I've got another, and I've had to adapt a bunch of training programs to this specific situation. And that's where, you know, that flexibility in your approach is super important for these guys traveling to different places. When they're on challenge tour, it's harder because it varies week to week. I've tried encouraging lots of the guys to look for like CrossFit boxes, places like that to go and train, because they're everywhere now, and you can usually find a decent gym that's well equipped, even in the most of remote places. But sometimes that just isn't the case. On the main tour, we have a truck that follows the tour around, so they've always got a fairly decent facility on board the truck that they can use. But if not, you know, we try and get them to adapt, and then their training adapts to where they are. So we always insist that they trying to, you know, if they're traveling, they're lifting heavy at the start of the week, and then during tournament days, they're generally lifting that little bit lighter, more ballistic focused. But then some of the guys who build up decent competency will then start lifting during the week as well, you know, heavier. And it's just getting their heads around the fact that it's okay to lift on playing days, is because they're playing 4 days of the week. You can't afford not to get a lift session in at some point. So, you know, but some of them are just of this attitude, mustn't do anything to upset the balance, you know, because they're, again, so technically focused. Everything has to be just so. And, you know, if anything, you know, external comes in and ruins that, they'll bin it as fast as they took it on board. So, you know, that's just how these guys kind of operate. But, and then the other thing is the sleep schedule, because of the hotel rooms all the time. Yep. We teach them hotel room hygiene. You know, like there's a little red LED on my TV that at night I put something across it to hide that. You know, there's other things like quite often we tell them to travel with electrical tape to do exactly the same thing, just cover up the little LEDs because they're annoying while you're trying to sleep. You know, make sure the room temperature is cold, all this type of stuff, just to get them to adapt to travel schedule. I know I've ranted on a little bit, but just to get them to adapt to travel schedules. And then obviously they're jumping a lot of time zones as well. We teach them sort of good sleep practice around time zone changes, because that weird time zone shift, I don't know if you've ever been, you guys will know it from if you travel from the Western United States to the Eastern United States in one go. It's what, a 6 hour time difference, 5 hour time difference?
3.
But it's 3 hour time difference. Yeah. Maybe not so bad then. But if you're traveling from here, from say the UK to Dubai, that's a 6 hour time difference. That's a really weird time difference in that it's enough to kind of fuck everything up in terms of your schedule. For instance, I'm flying to Dubai in like 2 weeks. I've got a flight at 8 o'clock in the evening. I'm going to try and sleep on the plane as best as possible. It's like a 6.5 hour flight. But by the time I get to Dubai, it'll be 7 a.m. in the morning there, but my brain will think it's 3 a.m. where I am. So I'm going to feel kind of ruined from that. My phone's jumping off again. So I'm going to feel kind of ruined from that. You know, and the players have to deal with that and then go straight into practice schedule, all that type of stuff. So I've traveled longer distances and found it better. It's the short distances, the 6 hour, 7 hour, 8 hour time differences are the ones that seem to mess you up the most, because it puts your day out by like a third. And that's always really
And
hard.
yeah, and it's also a difference like east west, west to east,
Yeah.
because whenever you're catching up. And I wanted to feel like bad, but sevens was way worse than that on a collision high and sport. We had sometimes 30 plus hours of travel and plus 10-hour difference. So when
Wow.
it's 12, it's not that bad because it's just like literally opposite. But when it was the weird ones like the sevens and like the 14s or something like that, and you go in and you're there for 4 days and you have to like run into people. But then again, as I was saying that you would lose that cognitive precision and sensibility for golf. So you're not running into people, but you really need your senses like sharp, sharp. So
Yeah.
uh, rugby, I mean, you can hit them anywhere. Some might argue,
Yeah.
but you know, you have like an area to hit and hurt someone. Whereas in the golf, I mean, if you're in a putter and you're sleepy and you can't see properly, and yeah,
Mhm.
but have you seen many studies on that? Or do people track that much, or is it just
So
you know
yeah,
relatively new?
there's more stuff on it now, but we do know that there's probably definitely some cognitive impairment that goes on from the travel. It's why some of the guys, particularly if it's a big event, like traveling around Europe's not so bad. But from a scheduling standpoint, they try and keep a little bit of space. So I think the last European Tour event was, sorry, the DP World event was last week. We've now got 2 weeks, and then it's Dubai. So they've actually got some time if they want to come over earlier, which is what a lot of them do, to try and get the body clock shift in. They do try and schedule as smartly as possible, but sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. So for instance, we've got some events I think coming up soon, which is like South Africa, then Middle East, then South Africa again, possibly. I think it might be 2 South African events on the bounce, but it's going to be tough for those going between the South African events and the other events. So it's yeah.
Yes, it depends also like on how people react individually, and because you know
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking, oh, you might schedule a night flight, so I sleep in the plane. But yes, is that a good night's sleep? Whereas you know if you travel during the day and it's not a very long sleep, then you know you either use what's it called like the terms with like this psychers, or whatever is it that stimulated your circadian rhythm. So you know the light, social activity, exercise,
Mm-hmm.
help with a bit of melatonin here and there. Can you start waking up or going a bit later when you're at home, given like you know there's not a life save was it daytime saving? Like it's now in the
Daytime saving,
UK.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a pitch black at like 5
Yeah.
p.m. So it's not really about like the clock on its own, it's just about the light and the
Yeah.
activity and the food intake as well, right?
Yeah, that all makes a difference. I've seen differing strategies where people suggest not eating on the flight over, and then only eating when you get there the next day to try and help reset the circadian rhythm. I've seen lots of different, like fasting while flying, other things. But like for instance, for a lot of my UK guys, melatonin is a prescription only thing here, so you can't get a hold of it. Like in Europe, in different places, you can get a hold of it. So it varies from place to place as well. So you
Yeah.
know,
In
yeah, just
Argentina,
don't
walk
go
in
to
and be
don't.
like, "Can I have 2 boxes?" I'd be like, "Yeah, there you go, 500 pills."
Yeah, I know. Although I once had a fighter take melatonin, and he was using like a triple dose to get to sleep, and
Oh,
he didn't
Like
mention it to
15,
me,
yeah, I was
but
about to say, what do
once
you consider a dose? Sorry to interrupt.
5 mg.
Five or yeah, what?
yeah, he was taking like 15 or 20 or something. So it wasn't so bad while he was taking it. It was when he tried to stop taking it
Well,
that
that's the thing,
that
because
was
it's was it 3 or 4 days when like the inhibitory like stuff in your body starts. Like it's not very long, so you stop
no.
producing it. So then you just need to sleep. If not, you just like
He couldn't get to sleep.
don't sleep deep. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he slept for like a week, like or something. Like it's just that's because again these guys like with fighters
Oops.
in particular, maybe too much CTE for this guy, but
Oh,
everything is more is better. So
Yeah, the more the
surely a
better.
triple
Yeah.
triple dose of melatonin that'll get me, and it did get him to sleep because he used to have terrible sleep, but he started sleeping really well for about I don't know 2 months, and then after that he came back to me. He was like, I can't sleep anymore. I'm like, why? What's wrong? He's like, well, my melatonin ran out. I was like, well, how much were you taking? And then my mouth hit the floor, and he was like, yeah, triple dose.
That's
So yeah.
oh, Jesus.
one of the questions that I had hearing you talk about that was the DP tour with like, you said you're going here there, like, is there a high performance manager, like making sure, because again, it just sounds like, hey, okay, I'll work with you. I'll work with you. Like, how do you personally handle that? Like making sure that you know what they've done in the past and any like.
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks to modern technology, we now have you have your online workplaces. So the whole team has one of these, and any work we do with players, profiling stuff gets put up onto like a portal, and then when other coaches pick them up elsewhere, we can take a look at their file, pull that up for the player, and then that just works for the S&C coaches. The physios that we work with run like a physio-based system. I can't remember what it's called, but everything, all the notes are kept. There's everything. There's a pretty good digital filing system that we use for all of that stuff, so that we can monitor and follow players over time. And then what we happen to do, because we categorize players, I think I mentioned this on the last one of these I did, is that we categorize players based on necessity. So green, red, and green, amber, and red light, and we basically try and push the ones that are kind of red light onto other coaches and make sure that they're followed up and everything is good. The ones that are green light lit are the ones that we know that can just get on with what they need to do. So, and we have a head S&C guy that helps us coordinate and organize all this stuff. We even do things like have WhatsApp groups for the players that basically we have all the players on board and we can share information to them directly, just to cut out the middleman of having like more bureaucratic oversight. So it's just using all the different tools at our disposal. If that has to be WhatsApp, if it has to be an email, if that has to be a phone call, just to follow guys up that we know need following up, and the ones that don't, we don't. So it's a system that we're trying to adapt it as best we can as we go.
I mean, that again, I'm sure it's got to be, difficult and to say the least. And how do you personally like, what would be your advice to those listening on how to handle it as best as possible?
So I guess our situation is unique because we never know who's going to come see us week to week.
Yeah.
But what we can do is chase down the guys we know who are going to be there, who we've had high engagement with historically, and make sure we look after those guys. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be trying to pull teeth with guys who aren't interested in engaging with the service. We know that if we pull on certain people, they have good engagement with us, they then perform well, those other guys will turn around and go, because golf is very peer-led, they'll be like, well, who's doing your S&C? Who's doing your physio? Well, the ETPI team are doing it. And they're like, oh, okay. And then those guys will come on board. And golf is very much like that. It's a lot of it's based on trust, referral, and that's what it makes it unique and kind of different to other sports, because there is no top-down, performance organization. I always say that golfers quite often their own performance managers, which adds to a lot of stress of what they're doing, because like we said before, they've got all these different coaches telling them lots of different things, and they're the ones trying to organize all this stuff. And I have seen some managers take that role on board to some extent, and some coaches try and do that for their players, but fundamentally it's always the player is the one that's having to make a lot of these decisions. But in terms of the way we coordinate on tour, we try and make sure that the high engagement guys are the ones we serve.
One of the other questions that I had was was it live that you said that nobody gets cut, or on this one?
There's no.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's no cut on live, is my understanding.
And you also had said though you're at 45 on this one, correct? So there will be no cuts.
No, there'll be no cut, but this is a grand final event, so it's unique.
So yeah, my question was, if there's no cut, how come you guys were only there until day 2? Like, is there no benefit to try to stay there days 3 and 4?
No, because generally when the days the guys are playing is generally when we probably see them least, because they'll generally try and fit in gym work in the evening and or even early in the morning.
Yep.
The other thing is budget. So because we're all contractors by and large.
Yep.
They'll only budget for us for so many days, and there is sort of and as things change and as S&C proves its value, there may well be more opportunity for us going forwards. But right now, the way we're working best is just coming in on the guys' practice days, because that's when the guys have the most availability, and that's when they'll come and see us. But for instance, because a lot of the players go early to Dubai to practice, I'm in Dubai for 3 days instead of 2.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Fernando, do you have any other questions for him? Because I want to respect his time, or if there's anything particular you want to talk golf related, I'd love to have you back on again later, but let's try to keep this just about golf.
We could always, yeah, we want to keep it about golf. At some point, we can talk about Arnold Allen.
I don't know who that
You
is.
know.
I apologize to show myself. Like,
I'm
Ooh,
insulted.
cliffhanger for next episode.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about it in the next episode. Well, he's the one who's going to beat Volkanovski and become UFC featherweight champion. So
yeah, no, listen, I want to talk all things Brazilian jiu-jitsu and MMA with you. Like, you kidding me? I mean, I selfishly want to know how to do a better job. Like, my buddy who's my head striking coach and he's an owner of a gym, like, yeah, I want to know. And then, you know, we're going to save it because you already did a webinar on Strength Coach Network. So if you want to know more, go to Strength Coach Network for it.
Hook, plug, committed. This is the second chicken week in a row that we get someone to commit to another one before the recording ends. And for William, it will be
I want to talk UFC.
Yeah.
So,
Here's a question that I do have. You're at the Rolex event. Are they giving you a Rolex?
I've been to a number of Rolex events, and thus far I have acquired 0 Rolexes. So yeah,
maybe it's like, you know, the coffee shops where you get like all those stamps, and then after 10 stamps you just say Rolex.
Possibly, I don't know. I keep seeing things about like hitting holes in one and then getting a Rolex, but I don't think I've got any chance of doing that. So you know, I'll leave it to the professionals.
Here, why don't you leave any of our listeners with where they should follow you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Powering Through. You can find me on Twitter at WS Wayland. We've got our website as well, which is powering-3.com, but that's more for the gym. I sometimes put blog posts up on there and stuff like that. But yeah, if you go to my Instagram, most of my stuff is there, and that's at Powering Through.
And full disclosure for our listeners, I purchased a Powering Through t-shirt and my RDL 1RM went up 20%. So make sure you go get one. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. You enjoy the rest of your evening. Let you guys go. And thank you.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.